Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, or morning or evening, depending on when you're viewing this video. My name is State Representative Joe Sosnowski, representing both Winnebago and Boone County in Northern Illinois. And today we have a special guest, Judge Jean Doherty. And Judge, just wanted to welcome you to this, this broadcast. Thanks for taking a couple minutes out of your day. And, just for our viewers, I wanted to let them know that, we wanted to have you to talk a little bit about what's happening in the judicial system here locally, cover a couple topics of how things have changed, what you've seen, but also, just a brief moment or two to get to know you. And so I wanted to turn it over to you if you'd like to give a little introduction of yourself.
Well, thank you. And first of all, thank you for inviting me on. Sometimes the judicial branch is the one branch of government that people have the least exposure to and the least knowledge of what we're doing and how we do it. So I obviously appreciate this opportunity to make some of that known to people. As far as I'm concerned, I'm a 17th Circuit judge. The 17th Circuit is Winnebago County and Boone County, so similar to your district. And I have been a circuit judge since 2007. I was appointed to that position by the Illinois Supreme Court, but it's ultimately an elected position. So a year and a half later, I ran and was elected. As a judge, I hear mostly civil cases. I've heard different kinds over my tenure. I've sat in both Winnebago and Boone at different points in time. For the past 2.5 years, I have served as selected by my fellow circuit judges as the chief judge of the circuit. And that's a lot more chief and a lot less judge, meaning that we spend a lot of time dealing with more administrative matters in the court. And, you could consider the chief judge sort of like the CEO of the court. The chief judge is the nominal employer of a number of court employees. We also set up all of our operational systems, and we're really responsible as chief judges to plan the path for the circuit over the time ahead. And ultimately that responsibility falls to me. Prior to being a judge, I practiced law here in this area and also extended the practice beyond the area, but with a Rockford law firm, and I did mostly civil litigation in that firm.
Great. Well, you brought up a couple topics which we'll love to talk about, but first I just wanted to, just on a personal note, I don't know if you want to share schooling, your background there, sure. But also, what kind of guided you to wanting to get into law and then eventually being a judge? Anything in particular, or any special influences in your life?
Well, I'm lived in Rockford almost all my life. I live here now with my wife. We've raised 3 kids here. As far as the interest in law, it wasn't something that I grew up wanting to be a lawyer. I think that at some point I figured out that this is what I'm best at doing, looked at other fields and figured out that I ought to do the thing that I seem to be good at because it's just sort of matches my skill set the best. Did not plan on becoming a judge, although I was in the judicial system. The first job that I had, I worked as a law clerk for, at that point, appellate judge Phil Reinhardt, also a Rockford guy. Worked as a law clerk for him, and my fellow law clerk at that time was Ian Johnston, who today had his hearing for his nomination to serve as successor to Judge Reinhardt and Judge Capalla in the federal court.
Sure. And what law school did you attend? I'm sorry if I missed that.
I neglected to answer that.
Oh,
First
that's
of all, probably more relevant, I was a Boylan grad.
Very good, yes.
And
local,
I
for sure.
Went to Northern Illinois for both college and law school.
Great. Well, I'm a Northern Illinois alum myself, as you know, and my wife graduated both degrees from Northern Illinois also. So great school, and
Absolutely.
it's been actually particularly good to see the law school, which generally speaking is younger than many law schools, but the amount of judges and attorneys of high quality that have been produced out of Northern Illinois has really grown and expanded, especially in Northern Illinois and Southern Wisconsin regions. So
Absolutely agree with that.
good to have you as part of the alumni base. So you kind of touched on some of the questions I was just going to ask briefly about your term in office. I don't know if you mentioned this, but you kind of gave a breakdown of your responsibilities as chief judge, which is great. And I think you're right. Fortunately, probably a lot of people don't know a lot about the judicial system, and that's hopefully because they have not had to be in the judicial system other than as an employee. Hopefully nobody was going up too often for tickets and things like that. But as a chief judge, you mentioned that position. Is that a couple-year term? Do you kind of get reelected yearly by your co-circuit judges? How does that process work normally?
Well, it's different in different circuits. Our circuit, we have two-year terms, and that's presumptively the end of your time as chief judge. However, we also have kind of an escape hatch to where we can say, if enough judges vote for it, we're happy to leave things the way they are. We will extend it. We actually have extended the last two chief judges a little bit beyond the expiration of their term. I don't anticipate that'll happen with me, so I'll be in this position for the next year and a half.
Sure. And just one extra question on your role as chief. I'm sure some viewers may have the same question. So judges are either circuit or associate.
Right.
How much oversight, if any, do you have over the workload that a particular judge has? Do you review their work from time to time, offer suggestions? Is it collaborative? How's that process work?
It's a really good question because it is something that I think people mistake the role of the chief judge. I decide ultimately, and this is not autocratic. We seek out information from our colleagues. We all work together very well. But ultimately, I've got to decide who gets assigned to what courtrooms and what responsibilities and schedules and that kind of thing. But each judge, whether an elected circuit judge or one of the associate judges appointed by the circuit judges, each one is an independent constitutional officer. Each one takes their oath and owes their duty to make the decisions that in their eye satisfies their obligations under the law and under the Constitution. They are answerable to somebody, but it's the appellate court. The appellate court is where somebody who feels that they didn't get the right outcome, whether substantively or as a matter of procedure, that's where somebody would go to get that reviewed. As chief judge, I'm not like the boss in terms of what judges do in their courtrooms and their decision-making in a case. That's still an independent constitutional office that is answerable to the appellate court, but not to me in terms of their decision-making in a case.
Right. Very interesting. Now, having said that, even though there is that independence, when there's maybe bigger questions that come up, is there, like obviously you don't release opinions as a group like the U.S. Supreme Court, but is there collaboration between cases, or do judges keep kind of more siloed when it comes to a case? Or if they have questions, do they bounce it off fellow judges?
Very much the latter, very much the latter, that there is built-in collaboration. The circuit judges meet once every other month. The associate judges meet once every other month, and then all of the judges meet once every other month. In addition to that, the different divisions, the juvenile court, the family court, the civil court judges, and the criminal division, we all meet in those different subgroups. So that's already baked in, and that's designed to make sure we all are on the same page, because law changes and issues come up that you didn't see yesterday. So it's important that we hear from each other, find out when something new has arisen in an application, maybe of an old statute that we all ought to know about. So that's important to share that information. And also, when it comes to something new, especially as we try to figure out what's our path through this new law or this new legal decision, while we're all independent deciders in our cases, we would just as soon be consistent with each other. So it's good that we talk it out and try to arrive at a consensus view, not in regard to a particular case, but in regard to an issue that will keep repeating itself in lots of cases.
Sure. Yeah, great. And one final question, just kind of on day-to-day duties. I guess in simple, as far as workload, the difference between a circuit and an associate, is there a difference in types of cases or courtroom, or how does that differentiation of duties work?
I think once upon a time there used to be a big difference, and that the circuit judges got all the big courtrooms, major felony and major civil, and the associate judges got what in the minds of some might be considered the lesser assignments. I think that's changed, and it's in no small part due to the fact that we realize there is no lesser case, right? If it's your case, it's an important case, and we need the judges to treat it like it's an important case. So I'll give you an example. John Lowry has been an associate judge for a long time, and for quite a few years, he has sat in one of the bigger felony courtrooms, meaning a full felony caseload, just like some of his circuit judge colleagues. He was elected to the circuit bench, and so now he's a circuit judge, and he was prepared to keep that assignment. But when we had an opening in the juvenile court, which in the delinquency court, which sometimes people think of that as where you'd put a newer judge. Judge Lowry sought that out because he felt that was where he could make an important difference to our community and in the lives of the young people that go through that court. So it isn't stratified that circuit judges do this and associate judges do this. We have the judge matched to the courtroom based on their ability and experience.
Great. Oh, that's good to know. All right, so let's talk, just kind of what's happening today. In response to COVID, I know things have shifted in how the courthouse works. Would you like to give us just kind of an overview of what changes have happened, for those who have not had to make any appearance in court? How is that working? And then afterwards, I'd like to talk a little bit about what you see going forward, if there will be permanent changes or not.
Sure. Well, this all kind of started, as it did with most people, right around mid-March. And it was the day after we had the first case confirmed in Winnebago County, we really started looking, okay, how are we going to handle this? And our initial perspective was, if there's an illness spread through the community that takes people 2 to 3 weeks to get over, are we going to have a lot of rolling absences among staff? How are we going to deal with that? And very quickly, we learned that there really was a different interest that we had to serve, and that was of community health, which means that even if we could come to work, maybe we shouldn't come to work, that we should be the ones to help the way that all other businesses did in trying to reduce contacts between people. And I'll emphasize the governor's order always excluded court personnel. So it wasn't that we were bound by the governor's order, but I think the Illinois Supreme Court has charted out a course that's been largely parallel. And so from March 17th through June 1st, we were in a state of significantly reduced in-person court operations. And that caused us to go against the grain of what we've been working at for years, which is case management, efficiency, getting the much as we can out of a court date. And instead of that, we said, put that off for 2 months. That was a hard thing for us to adjust to. That's real whiplash. But we did it because we knew that was the right thing to do, and because the Supreme Court told us that's what we needed to do. During that time, we continued to try to increase our use of remote hearings. We also continued to hear some in-person things that we deemed essential, meaning they couldn't wait a month or two. On June 1st, we've reopened and we're hearing almost everything we did before, with the exception we have not had any civil jury trials. We're putting that off for the time being. But every other case we are now hearing.
Okay.
We're just doing it differently. We're
Gotcha.
trying to use more remote hearings still and get the bar used to that, figure out how to make sure the public can do that successfully. Every time we do one of those, it means that many fewer people are in the courthouse, right? If we can keep people out of the courthouse, we make the environment safer for the people who do come. That and things like spacing requirements, we've marked off on the floor in the courtroom where people should sit or stand. We're going to require you when you show up to wear a mask. Some areas are doing temperature taking. We're not doing that as a rule because of the additional manpower that it would take. And we really couldn't put that off on the sheriff. We did get through a donation, a machine that will take temperatures, and we can put that at one entrance, and that was in our juvenile court building. So slowly we're building back up to it. To this point, we have done 3 jury trials, and we've been very attentive to listen to what our jurors say about, are they afraid of coming down? Are they concerned about it? Hopefully what they're seeing is all the things that we've done, the strange layout of a room where people are set in chairs, 6 feet or so apart. It looks weird and uncomfortable, but I think it also conveys we're thinking this through. We're taking the advice of the health department. And maybe for that reason, we really have not had a great degree of pushback or concern from most of our jurors. So tip of the cap to them. They've stepped up. They understand that what we do is important, that someday it might be them that needs that trial, that case, civil or criminal. And so we much appreciate their cooperation even under these different circumstances.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. When you were talking about civil jury trials being paused still, when do you expect that to reopen, and how does that, backlog? Obviously, is there just this huge backlog now of cases, or is that something that's manageable as you get back into the process of hearing those?
Well, there certainly is a backlog. By the same token, not every case is tried the day it's set for trial. There may be late resolutions. So our challenge is to figure out a way, once we get going with jury trials, to wring out of the system as many as we can get done in as short a period of time. As I say, it's whiplash for us. Our standard mode of operation is get the cases to resolution.
Sure.
It doesn't help anybody to have them delay longer than they need to. And so we've reversed that in the last few months, and we want to get back to doing it the way we used to do it. We won't have any civil case jury trials until at the earliest August. And the reason we are not doing that is we want to get started with the criminal, where there are speedy trial, constitutional and statutory issues to deal with first, see how it goes in the process of assembling jury, and then see whether we can start folding in some civil jury trials. But we can't bring in more jurors at the same time. That's going to crowd the building in a way that'll make people feel unsafe and potentially be unsafe. So we don't want to do that.
Sure. So curious, in regards to hearings and trying to do more virtual hearings, does that, and I guess it's kind of a long-term question, does that help speed things up? Does it slow things down? And then is that something going forward that you will encourage more of that to, maybe, if it does indeed help a little bit? How does that work, and how will that work going forward?
I don't know that it helps from the court's perspective. The hearing still goes the same way it would if it were in person. I think it can help lawyers. I think it can help litigants, even self-represented litigants. And I think it can help people who pay lawyers. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because it can make their time be used more efficiently. We know, now it's not the same here as it would be in Cook County, but if you've got to come to court, you're probably taking the morning off or the afternoon off, right? If you could tell us, I don't have to take the morning off, but I might need to step away for 20 minutes in the middle of the morning. Is that okay? I think that's going to be easier for people. than having to come down and blow more time than that. And if it's a hearing where we really have, especially those hearings where it's a small amount on the docket, not a small number of cases, but each case having a small item or two to deal with, boy, I sure hate the thought of people missing lots of work. I hate the thought of employers losing lots of employee time if they don't have to. And that's where I think these virtual hearings are going to pay off. And so we're still fine tuning it all. We're still finding our way, but the genie's out of the bottle and we're not going back.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, just again, not experiencing it day to day, the thought was, wow, if somebody had a window that they knew they had to be available, and maybe even one day they'll get a text message saying, hey, your case is up in 10 minutes. Can they log in? And does that allow, that to kind of clip along without then having a lot of people come in? And as you mentioned earlier, the safety of not bringing a lot of people into the building, still getting through cases quickly. But then, yeah, definitely for employers and employees,
and
it sounds like.
Just as you and I are doing right now, I mean, I could have driven over to your office or you could have driven over to mine. We're doing the same thing without expending that time.
Right. It
seems like an efficiency.
Great. Well, that'll be interesting to see as we move forward how that will work both locally and across the country. So I don't want to, we're getting close to our time limit here. Just want to, ask, I guess, one more somewhat follow-up question and leave it somewhat open-ended for you. But two-part, I guess. One, are you seeing any spike in traditional cases being referred? I think, again, not to get into law enforcement and day-to-day police, but I think there's sometimes maybe a perception that because of the quarantine, maybe there's been spikes in cases or crimes that have been referred to the court. We don't need to get into specific numbers, but do you see anything from a court management perspective that cases coming in are spiking, or is it somewhat consistent with what historically we've seen in Winnebago County?
I don't want to say that this is based on our analysis of our cases, but certainly there's a general belief that the domestic violence cases have increased. Some cases have decreased. I think police officers are probably wisely using their discretion in whether to pull somebody over for a ticket, create a personal contact between the officer and that person, and mainly focus on some different types of crime. We cooperated with law enforcement by excusing them from processing personal warrants if it was for a low-level offense. So rather than have them bring that person in their squad car down to the jail, book them, have all of those personal exposures, they could just issue them a notice to appear in court. So there are different things that have come out of the law enforcement side. I assume everything will pop back to about where it was once we get going full speed.
And then just challenges going forward. I mean, we touched about what we see in the future. Do you see any particular challenges other than, I guess, catching up on caseload, but just as we move through the remainder of this year, any certain concerns or issues, or what's your thoughts going forward?
Yeah, well, certainly a challenge always for the courts is funding. And we were very fortunate that the legislature, for the first time in a few decades, and I thank you for this, gave us full funding for probation. There is a recognition that both for the outcome of the defendant's case, for the defendant, meaning does the defendant do well and get back on the road, or does the defendant reoffend? And from the perspective of the public in terms of cost, probation is oftentimes a better, more effective option, but it does require those probation officers to keep tabs on folks. So it's been very helpful that the legislature has fully funded our probation. But locally, this virus has caused, and the shutdowns have caused, some serious reductions in funding. That's our big challenge. But let's not overlook the opportunity. We've been talking about doing more remote hearings for a long time. We've been talking about doing online dispute resolution, kind of like people might do if they're familiar with PayPal or eBay, to resolve disputes directly with somebody through a mechanized system without going to court. And not to have it decided, but to have it settled. This is pushing us. It's broken down some of the barriers to this. So while there's a challenge ahead, there's also an opportunity ahead to maybe do some things differently, do them better, and be a better court system at the end of the day for the public.
Great. No, very optimistic. I appreciate that thoughts on that. And we do have challenges, not just statewide, countywide, but how those financial challenges affect areas like yours, and the creativity though that possibly produces. So I wish you the best. And Judge, thank you so much for your time, but thank you for your service also to the community. Like you mentioned in your opening, it's the circuit position is an elected position. So there is a certain political element to your job, and you are, like you mentioned, you and your fellow circuits are responsible to the people of this community. And so, thanks for your service in that realm. Thanks for the work that you do. And I know you're running a great operation over there. So thanks for that. I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
And thanks for joining us. I said I'd give you a moment if we missed anything. Is any closing comment that you would like to make, or anything that I didn't ask?
I'm going to do what I wish more of my lawyers in my courtrooms would do. I'm going to say no further comment.
That would definitely help move cases along quicker. Well, thanks again, Judge, for joining us. I really appreciate your time. Look forward to talking with you in the near future.
All right. Thank you so much again.
Thanks.